There is a silent kind of pain that almost no one admits feeling. The pain of doing your best for someone and still receiving little, almost nothing, or absolutely nothing in return. You try to be fair, kind, present, but people simply don't respond with the same frequency, the same emotion, the same care. And it eats you up inside because you start to believe that the problem is you, that maybe something is missing, that maybe you don't have enough value. But here's a truth no one taught you. People don't treat you the way you treat them. They treat you the way you allow them to. And that is the key that completely changes the dynamics of your relationships. Everything you've lived up to now, the frustration, the lack of reciprocity, the broken expectations, is not bad luck, not destiny, not punishment. It's a psychological pattern you repeat without realizing it. And when you understand this pattern, you change everything, your posture, your boundaries, your energy, and automatically the way the world treats you. Today, you will understand why some bonds always hurt, why certain relationships drain you, and why you always find yourself giving more than you receive. And more importantly, you will discover how to break this cycle and build connections where you never again need to beg for reciprocity because it appears naturally. Stay with me until the end. This may be the emotional turning point you've needed for years without knowing it. The greatest pain in human relationships is born in that silent space between what you offer and what you receive in return, the abyss of expectation. That's where reciprocity becomes a distorted mirror, reflecting less than you give and much more than you feel. It's the kind of pain no one sees, but everyone carries inside, like a small stone in the emotional shoe. And when that stone grows, frustration becomes a constant companion. A person begins to believe they have no value when, in reality, they're just looking in the wrong direction. The emotion gets heavy, the heart tries to understand, and awareness gets lost in this maze of intentions. And that's when boundaries begin to disappear without you noticing. He always believed that treating people well would be enough to be treated the same way. A beautiful thought, but naive. In many relationships, expectation works like an invisible elastic band. The more you stretch it, the more it hurts when it snaps back. For example, someone who gives too much at work expecting recognition eventually realizes that reciprocity does not follow effort. Frustration arises not from lack of skill, but because the world doesn't operate in symmetry. The emotion he puts into what he does not guarantee the other person sees it the same way. And little by little, the mirror of relationships starts revealing an uncomfortable truth. Something inside him knows this pattern comes from a deeper place. It's like giving flowers to someone who never learned to recognize scents. No matter how much you offer, the person simply doesn't have the emotional awareness to understand the value of your gesture. This happens often with people who grew up in cold environments where showing affection was seen as weakness. These people carry misaligned boundaries, and when you show up with authenticity, they don't know what to do. The lack of reciprocity isn't unwillingness, it's lack of emotional repertoire. And that's where the conflict appears. You feel deeply, you give sincerely, and you receive silence. In this unequal exchange, frustration slowly installs itself, almost without asking permission, and he begins to realize that expecting too much is far too costly. If he could observe his life from above, like someone analyzing a map, he would notice that many of his pains come from the same root. High expectations in relationships that offer little. It's like watering a plant that sprouted without roots. It's not lack of effort, it's structural impossibility. A simple example, that friend who only shows up when they need something has never understood the concept of reciprocity because their internal boundaries are fragile. They don't perceive the value of what they receive, so they don't give back. And this corrodes the authenticity of bonds. Each small disappointment becomes a bitter dose that accumulates over time, until one day awareness wakes up, even if still timid, to what has been happening. In this silent journey, he learns that his frustration doesn't come from people, but from the image he created of them. Expectation turns strangers into heroes and ordinary relationships into promises that never existed. It's like building entire castles on soft sand. One misunderstood gesture and everything collapses. And when that happens, he feels like he's lost a part of himself. But interestingly, it's in this moment that the inner mirror begins to show the truth. Maybe the problem isn't how much he gives, but how much he expects. And this realization opens an important door, a portal that will lead him directly to the next understanding of why no one gives back what he gives. When he finally realizes that each person sees the world through different lenses, something important starts to light up inside him. The relational mirror is never flat. It's full of cracks, distortions, and old memories that shape every response. That's why reciprocity is so unstable. What he offers with genuine emotion can reach the other side as weight, threat, or simple misunderstanding. And that creates frustration without any logical explanation, as if the value of the gesture were reduced along the way. Expectations shatter like thin glass, cutting whoever touches it. And without realizing it, each person ends up treating the other not as they truly are, but as they learn to survive. He always believed that acting authentically would open doors, but the truth is that many people can only respond according to what their wounds allow. It's as if every relationship were a hall of mirrors at a carnival. He sees himself tall, generous, and present, but the other sees him as small, threatening, or exaggerated. A common example: when he offers sincere help, someone may interpret it as intrusion simply because they grew up in an environment of distrust. There's no bad intention, there's emotional memory, and this fractured memory dictates the limits of what the other can give. Becoming aware of this changes everything. This is why deep emotions, when they pass through broken mirrors, turn into noise. He sends affection, but the person receives pressure. He sends care, but the other feels invaded. He offers reciprocity, expecting reciprocity, and receives silence. Imagine speaking Portuguese to someone who only understands Chinese. The message exists, but it doesn't reach. Relationships work the same way. Gestures are not lacking, internal translations are. And this lack of translation creates a sequence of frustrations that pile up until he believes he is not valued, when in fact the value was never seen because the mirror was already in pieces. He realizes that many people don't treat him poorly because they want to hurt him, but because they simply don't know how to do differently. It's like asking someone who has always lived in darkness to describe the colors of a sunset. They cannot give what they never learned. And so relationships become constant misalignments. He offers authenticity while the other responds with defense. He opens his heart while the other tightens boundaries. And without realizing it, both lose themselves in their own expectations. This pattern is so common that when he starts to see it, his awareness expands in a way that is almost painful, but liberating. And then comes the question that changes everything. If each person sees the world through a broken mirror, why do I keep expecting perfect reflections? This reflection opens an emotional clearing inside him. He understands that it's not about lowering his value, nor about accepting crumbs, but about adjusting expectations and recognizing that relationships are not exact equations. He offers what he is. The other gives back what they can. When he understands this, a new door appears, a door that explains why he gives so much and receives so little. And that will lead him directly to the next point of this silent journey. He always thought loving too much was beautiful until he realized the silent cost of that habit. When someone gives more than the other can receive, the balance of reciprocity breaks and expectation becomes an invisible form of pressure. It's like trying to fill a cracked glass. No matter how much emotion you pour in, it never fills. And the worst part is that the more he gives, the more the other becomes accustomed to not noticing the value of the gesture. This frustration grows slowly, occupying spaces that once felt light, and before he knows it, his boundaries have been crossed without warning. Sometimes loving too much is the most subtle way of losing yourself. Excessive love works like an inverted mirror. It shows only how hard you're trying, but hides the exhaustion it generates. In relationships, this creates a nearly dangerous imbalance. He gives himself fully, while the other gives back only fragments. A clear example, when he always says yes, people stop seeing his authenticity and start seeing him as a resource, someone available, not someone valuable. And realizing this hurts. It's as if his heart had become a house with the door always open, where anyone can enter but few choose to stay, and each departure leaves an even bigger hole. It's not uncommon for generous people to carry a chronic sense of frustration. They expect the other person to notice their emotional effort, their affection, their attention. But the truth is that many people only wake up when you disappear. This dynamic resembles a song being played in a noisy room. No matter how beautiful it is, no one hears it. And the more he tries to turn up the volume, more love, more presence, more giving, the more the other withdraws. Because excess creates comfort, and comfort diminishes value. He realizes that by overstepping his own boundaries, he taught others to overstep as well. The root of this behavior often lies in an old expectation, that if he loves enough, he will finally be seen. But this creates a complicated emotional cycle. He gives too much trying to fill a mirror that reflects nothing back. A practical example, sending long messages to someone who replies with "okay," or always initiating while the other simply receives. This lack of reciprocity is not a coincidence. It's a consequence. And it's at this point that awareness begins to awaken. Maybe loving doesn't mean sacrificing yourself, but adjusting the rhythm so the other can learn to walk too. The cost of excessive love is paid in emotional installments. Each one takes a little of his energy, his self-esteem, his sense of authenticity. And when he notices this, something inside him finally begins to shift. He discovers it's not about loving less, but about loving with boundaries. Because when love exceeds all contours, it stops being grounding and begins to weigh. And no one responds to weight with appreciation, they respond with avoidance. This quiet realization opens space to understand the next point, how different interpretations shape every gesture in relationships. He begins to understand that in human relationships, nothing is as simple as it seems. Every gesture passes through an invisible maze of interpretations, where intention enters one way and comes out completely transformed. What to him is care, to the other may sound like pressure. What feels like closeness to him may feel like intrusion to the other. This misalignment creates frustration and wears down reciprocity. It's like speaking softly in a room full of echoes. Every word returns distorted, and in this process, emotions become scrambled, losing their authenticity. Awareness begins to make room for these nuances. A clear example, when he asks someone to let him know they got home safely, he does it out of affection. But the person receiving the message may interpret it as excessive concern, depending on the boundaries they learned in life. This shows that the expectation and emotional weight of each gesture depend more on the other person's history than on his intention. Relationships function like mirrors with filters no one controls. And the more he tries to be clear, the more he realizes that the other person's interpretation is guided by old memories. Reciprocity, in this scenario, is always a delicate dance between what is said and what is understood. The maze of interpretations is built from past experiences, beliefs, and fears. Someone who grew up hearing constant criticism may interpret a compliment as sarcasm. Someone marked by abandonment may see distance, even in the most innocent silence. And so relationships turn into riddles. He realizes his emotion travels through paths he cannot control, and that explains why the value of what he offers gets lost along the way. Frustration is born exactly from this difference between intention and interpretation. And here his awareness begins to perceive the complexity of human connections. There is no neutral communication when the heart is involved. Every word carries emotional baggage, and each person reads that baggage differently. He has seen this at work, for example, when a simple piece of feedback was taken as a personal attack, or at home, when a gentle request turned into an argument. These situations show that relationships are not just about what is said, but how the other person translates it. And if the translation is made through wounds, the result is almost always unfair. This perception opens a new field of understanding about boundaries. The big shift happens when he understands he cannot control the other person's interpretation, but he can control how much he exhausts himself trying. This insight changes his emotions, his expectations, and even the way he positions himself. He realizes his relationships will only be healthy when they don't depend on the other person's reading, but on the clarity of his own boundaries. And this awareness opens the door to an even deeper point, the one that explains why the more he tries to prove his worth, the less the other seems to see it. He discovers one of the most silent rules of human relationships. The more he tries to prove his worth, the less valuable he seems in the eyes of others. It's a cruel paradox. Expectation pushes him to try harder and harder, hoping for reciprocity, but excessive effort communicates the opposite. It's like trying to sell a diamond while begging someone to buy it. The buyer starts to doubt its value. This psychological mirror distorts perception, turning dedication into desperation. And that creates frustration because he believes he's doing the right thing. Awareness of this mechanism opens a new way of observing his emotions. This phenomenon appears in many relationships. At work, when he always volunteers to help and ends up being seen as replaceable. In romantic relationships, when giving too much leads to being treated as guaranteed. Excessive availability makes others see less authenticity and more neediness. People confuse loose boundaries with lack of value. A simple example, when he responds to messages immediately every day, the other person forms an expectation of endless priority, and any small pause becomes disappointment. The movement is subtle, but incredibly powerful. It's as if people had an internal thermometer that measures how much he values himself. The more he tries to convince the other person, the more that thermometer drops. Deep down, relationships function as silent negotiations of emotional value. If he places his emotion above all his boundaries, the other assumes those boundaries don't exist. And when they don't exist, there is no fair reciprocity. This imbalance creates a cycle of constant frustration. He realizes that by exaggerating his giving, he taught the other to see him as eternally available, and not as someone worthy of consideration. This psychological rule appears even in practical, everyday examples. Think of social media. Accounts that beg for attention rarely receive it, while those that maintain a firm and authentic presence attract followers naturally. Perceived value is higher when there is balance, not desperate giving. He begins to see this in his own life. When he adjusts his boundaries, even his energy changes. Expectation stops being a burden, and reciprocity, when it appears, arrives purer. And this quiet shift deeply transforms his awareness. The big revelation is that proving too much communicates lack, not value. Healthy relationships are born when both recognize their own shine without needing to beg for light in someone else's mirror. By understanding this, he begins reorganizing his emotions, reducing expectations, and adjusting the rhythm of his giving. And exactly at this point, when he realizes excess weakens him, a new question appears. Where does this pattern of trying too hard to avoid losing people come from? This question leads him to the next topic, the old wound that shapes all his relationships. He starts to realize that many of the pains he faces in relationships today didn't begin now. They are old echoes, wounds that formed when he didn't even know what emotional boundaries meant. Exaggerated expectations, the need for reciprocity, the fear of frustration, all of it reflects a past where he had to do a lot to receive a little. It's as if his internal mirror had been shaped by absences, not presences. And this lack of validation planted a quiet belief: I need to try harder to have value. A small belief, but a powerful one that still follows him today. This old wound appears in repeated patterns. At work, he accepts too many tasks to be recognized. In romantic relationships, he gives emotion even before knowing if the other person has space to receive it. In friendships, he positions himself as the solution for problems that aren't his. All of this because, long ago, he learned that love came conditioned by performance. A common example: children who only receive praise when they get high grades grow up believing they must perform to be seen. This expectation turns into constant frustration in adulthood. He begins to connect the dots. It's like carrying an emotional suitcase full of clothes that no longer fit. But out of habit, he keeps carrying it. Every new relationship becomes a stage where he repeats old choreographies: pleasing, yielding, adapting. And when he doesn't receive reciprocity, the pain is not just from the present. It's from every moment in his past when he tried hard and wasn't recognized. His emotions become confused because the old wound reacts before he even notices. It's like an alarm that goes off with any movement, and his awareness begins to notice the pattern. He's always trying to fill a void that wasn't created by the people around him today. Understanding this changes everything because he finally sees it's not people who cause so much pain, it's his old need to prove himself through them. He tries to validate his value to heal a lack they didn't create. And this places him in unbalanced relationships, where he gives more than he should and receives less than he deserves. When the origin of the wound is seen, the relational mirror changes. He realizes his authenticity doesn't need negotiation, only recognition. But to get there, he needs to learn something even harder: the weight of remaining silent. The old wound explains why he so easily accepts behaviors that should have boundaries. It explains why he thinks it's normal to expect reciprocity from those who have nothing to offer. It explains why frustration hits so hard when something simple goes wrong. And by seeing this, he understands that healing doesn't begin by changing others, but by changing what he believes he needs from them. This awareness opens a new chapter, one where he begins to recognize where he remains silent too often and how that silence hurts him more than he realizes. This door opens in the next topic. He realizes that his silence, the same silence he once believed proved maturity, has actually become a burden far too heavy. Swallowing words to avoid conflict is like filling your pockets with stones before crossing a river. You will inevitably sink. Every time he fails to express his boundaries, he reinforces a false expectation in the other person. The expectation that everything is fine. And when everything appears fine, reciprocity disappears because the value of his discomfort goes unnoticed. His emotions become imperceptible whispers, and awareness begins warning him that silence is not peace. It is self-betrayal. He always believed speaking less would prevent frustration, but the truth is that silence creates fragile relationships built on assumptions. It's like allowing a crack in the wall to grow. No one sees it, but one day the whole structure collapses. He doesn't speak when he's hurt, doesn't say when something crosses his boundaries, doesn't express when he feels undervalued. But the other interprets this as comfort. A classic example: When he accepts everything without question, the person assumes their actions have no consequences. And that's when his value slips through the fingers of someone who doesn't know how to take care of it. Silence also masks deep emotions. He pretends he doesn't care, when in reality he cares too much. He pretends he doesn't expect reciprocity, when expectation is consuming him inside. And this incoherence creates a broken mirror between who he is and who he shows himself to be. When he tries to stay authentic, he notices he is always calculating his words, always afraid of seeming too much. This kind of self-censorship wears down the soul. It's like trying to run with your feet tied together. The movement exists, but it doesn't move forward. And his awareness quietly asks him to break this cycle. In practice, he sees this happening in small moments. He doesn't say when he's overwhelmed at work and ends up receiving even more tasks. He doesn't say when a friend disappoints him and the cycle repeats. He doesn't express when a partner crosses emotional boundaries and frustration becomes routine. Every silence is interpreted as permission, and the more he stays quiet, the more relationships become unbalanced. Love weakens, friendship thins, and even respect erodes. He finally realizes that not speaking is as harmful as speaking too much, maybe even worse. This accumulated weight begins to charge its price. Emotion becomes muffled, personal value is questioned, and reciprocity becomes nearly impossible. He realizes that when he doesn't position himself, he doesn't receive what he needs. He receives what the other thinks he accepts. And that will never be enough. This awareness creates space for a profound change, recognizing that silence also communicates, and it communicates a lot. And with this perception, he approaches the next understanding, the one that reveals that expecting perfect reciprocity is an illusion, and that there is a new way to view it all. He grows up believing that if he does everything right, he will receive the same in return. But this is one of the greatest emotional misunderstandings we carry. Perfect reciprocity is a mirage. The more he runs toward it, the farther away it gets. Expectation creates an idealized image of relationships, like a mirror polished too perfectly, beautiful but unreal. And when reality arrives, bringing incomplete responses, frustration hits him without mercy. He discovers that people don't give back what he gives. They give back what they have inside, and this changes everything in his awareness. It's like planting a tree, expecting it to bear your favorite fruit regardless of the seed. No matter how much you water it, if the seed is different, the result will be too. In the same way, he offers emotion, care, presence, but the other may only be able to offer distance because that's what they learned. In relationships, each person loves in the language they know, and the authenticity of the gesture does not guarantee the desired return. This mismatch destroys his emotional boundaries because he begins to think something is wrong with him, when in fact he only confused expectation with promise. Many people don't reciprocate with the same intensity because they don't see the value of what they receive. It's a curious phenomenon. The more someone is loved, the less they notice the weight of that love until they lose it. He has lived this, dedicating himself to someone who only woke up after it was over. And he learned the hard way that reciprocity is not measured by the emotion he feels, but by the other person's awareness. There's no point expecting a closed heart to dance at the same rhythm as his. And understanding this removes a huge weight he didn't know he was carrying. The illusion of perfect reciprocity also fuels unfair comparisons. He looks at other people's relationships and wonders why his don't work like that. But every bond is its own universe, full of stories, traumas, broken mirrors, and confused boundaries. No one gives back the same because no one lived the same. Accepting this doesn't mean giving up on love. It means maturing. Frustration lessens when expectation adjusts to what is possible, not to what is imagined. And with this new lens, he begins to see the next point. Difficult relationships are not punishments. They are invitations. He finally realizes that chasing perfect reciprocity is like trying to align two different oceans so they have the same tide. That's not how it works. Each person has their own emotional rhythm, their own limits, their own inner mirror. And when he understands this truth, a weight lifts from his shoulders. Now, instead of expecting the other to give back equally, he starts asking, what is this relationship trying to teach me? This shift in awareness leads him to the next topic, where he discovers that the frustrations he experiences are not punishments, but opportunities for growth. He always thought the relationships that hurt the most were signs of failure, but over time, he realizes that many of them are silent invitations to see where he still needs to grow. Life has this peculiar way of teaching. It hurts first, explains later. Every frustration, every broken expectation, every lack of reciprocity is a mirror pointing inward, revealing ignored boundaries and unrecognized value. It's as if life whispered, "This is where you still lose yourself." And when he hears that whisper, his awareness begins to expand in a transformative way. He has been treated with disregard before, and only later realized that it wasn't about the other person. It was about what he accepted. Life uses relationships to show where he still needs to stand authentically. It's like a river that changes course every time it finds an obstacle. If he doesn't learn to direct the flow, he ends up drowning in his own emotion. When he understands that difficulties are disguised teachers, frustration loses its strength, and personal value begins to appear where previously there was only pain. These invitations appear in simple ways: a relationship where he gives too much, a job where his effort goes unrecognized, friendships where reciprocity never comes. Each of these experiences points to the same question: why are you accepting less than you deserve? And when he confronts that question, he realizes life is trying to align him with his authenticity, not to punish him, but to awaken him. It's like adjusting a camera lens. Suddenly, everything that seemed blurry becomes sharp, and his awareness sees what he previously ignored. When he begins to read these experiences as invitations and not defeats, everything changes. Emotion stops being an enemy and becomes a messenger. Expectation stops being naive and becomes a tool. Even frustration gains new meaning. It becomes the alert that he's negotiating his boundaries. And this understanding is powerful because it gives him back the responsibility he had handed over to others. He sees he is not in the world to adapt to broken relationships. He is here to create genuine connections. And this prepares him for the next point. Life's secret invitation in the end is simple. You can heal if you want. But healing means looking at yourself with honesty, recognizing where you give too much value, where you accept too little reciprocity, and where your authenticity is still chained. And in this process, he discovers that the question he always asked, "Why don't they treat me the way I treat them?" may not have been the most important one. There is a bigger question, capable of opening a door he never imagined. And that is the door the next topic reveals. He reaches a moment when he realizes that the question that followed him for so long, "Why don't they treat me the way I treat them?" does not lead to the real answer. The turning point happens when he understands the issue is not about them, but about what he allows. It's like entering a dark room and finally turning on the light. Everything that once seemed mysterious now becomes clear. Expectation without boundaries becomes an invitation to frustration. Reciprocity exists only when he positions himself, and authenticity blooms when awareness decides to claim its own value. True transformation begins when he realizes that every relationship is a silent agreement, and that he participated in those agreements without even noticing. By accepting little, he taught others to give him little. By staying silent, he taught others to ignore his emotional mirror. By expecting too much, he created fertile ground for disappointment. But when he decides to change his posture, the agreements begin to dissolve. He discovers that boundaries don't push people away, they push away abuse. And with this new understanding, personal value begins to emerge. The shift also involves recognizing that he is not responsible for what the other person feels, but he is entirely responsible for what he accepts. This difference changes everything. Frustration loses power when he sees he can choose where he places his affection, his energy, his emotion. It's like learning to drive after years of being a passenger. Even if the road has curves, he's now in control of the wheel. His relationships become conscious choices, not emotional survival, and this clarity changes how he sees himself in the world. From this point on, he realizes that reciprocity was never about equality, but about balance. It's not about receiving in the same measure, but receiving in a way that nourishes rather than drains. He begins choosing people who respond with authenticity, not just presence. And this transforms the kind of relationships he builds. It's like planting a new garden. Now he chooses the soil, the light, the water, and no longer depends on luck. Awareness expands, boundaries become clear, and personal value becomes non-negotiable. This shift in awareness makes him completely reformulate his question. Instead of, "Why don't they treat me the same?" a new reflection arises. Why do I allow myself to be treated this way? That's where everything changes. From this new perspective, he prepares for a different journey, where his relationships stop being broken mirrors and become true choices. And when this understanding matures, he's ready to take the next step, the one that opens the video, holds the viewer, and begins the message that can transform lives. In the end, what you discovered here is not just a psychological explanation, it's an invitation to take the wheel of your emotional life. You saw that it's not lack of value, not a flaw, not insufficiency. It's just a pattern that you now see clearly. And when awareness changes, everything around you must change too. Now you know where to adjust your expectations, where to set boundaries, where to protect your energy, and where to finally demand the reciprocity you always deserved. But let me ask you something only you can answer. Are you willing to stop accepting crumbs? Are you ready to say no where you always said yes? Will you continue waiting for people to treat you better, or will you teach them how you want to be treated? If any of these questions stirred something inside you, it's because the change has already begun. The next step is to apply. Observe your relationships with a new mirror. Test new boundaries. Review which connections nourish you and which ones drain you. Small actions change entire destinies, and if you start today, you may look back a few months from now and realize you're no longer the same person, because now you respect yourself first. And if this content spoke to you in any way, touched you, opened your eyes, or brought answers you couldn't find, then I invite you to continue this journey with me. Subscribe to Mind's Silent Echo, turn on notifications, and come learn week after week how to build relationships that are more conscious, deep, and true. After all, no one changes the world around them without first changing themselves.